You've reached the Signal Watch, movies, television, comics, and more. I'm your host, Ryan Steens. Join me and our cadre of co-contributors as we examine cultural artifacts of the 20th century, boldly explore the 21st, and try to put it all in perspective. Stay tuned. We're gonna try to make this work. Hey everybody, and welcome back to the Signal Watch. As always, I'm your host, Ryan Steens, and with me today is
Simon Day. Hello again.
Hey man, welcome back. And we're hitting kind of the end of an era with the podcast today.
Yeah, well, yes and no. We're finally doing a James Bond again, which I think we originally started this to do a long time ago. And then we got bored after about 7 of them. But which is interesting because I think the point of today is we're doing No Time to Die today. And I do have to say with this one especially, big spoilers. So go and watch it first. But I think, maybe the reason we kind of like haven't done a Bond for about a year, I think the last one was The Spy Loved Me, was even though we both love them, they are kind of very samey, a lot of them. You end up talking about the same things. Whereas this one has quite a lot of changes.
Yeah. The whole arc that they have done this time, I think you can think of storytelling or media that has, multiple installs in kind of 2 different ways. It's either episodic or it's serial storytelling. And by that, for people of my age, I would say episodic television or movies or whatever are everything gets reset at the end. So if you're talking about a Cheers episode, there might be a little bit of progress, but at the end they've resolved whatever the conflict was, and they're going to return. And that's more or less how Bond movies worked. With some, obvious, differences here and there. And we can talk about that as well. And I'm sure we will. But this one has been a serial. Every episode ended up pushing the story forward.
It has. I will say in a very clunky way, because they obviously didn't start off with that plan. But they have done it better than Star Wars. I will say that. They've kind of like I guess retrofitted this into a story arc. Because I feel like with Casino Royale and Quantum, they were just kind of telling a certain story, and Quantum was almost like an appendage to Casino Royale. It was like an add-on. And then Skyfall was pretty standalone, to be honest. And I think suddenly in Spectre, Blofeld went, aha, I was behind the last 3 films. It was all me. And those other guys were just kind of working for me, even though they never mentioned each other, or Spectre. And I guess like this one kind of moves on from that. And this one, I think, isn't it the first time we have a returning villain in the next film and a returning leading lady, maybe?
we had Blofeld obviously in a few Bond films.
Well, I mean, straight after, like the next film, the
Oh,
same actor.
yeah. I can't immediately think of any other ones, and certainly the having a leading lady who's not just returning as a tombstone is new.
I was thinking Jules. Jules is the only other person who's made it into the next film, I think, before this.
Yeah, I think that's actually true. Because they'd always end up killing off Odd Job or whomever. That was always a fan favorite. But Jaws, and that was of course the gag with Jaws to begin with, is he's the bad penny who's going to keep turning up.
Yeah, and the kids love him. The kids love him.
I did as a kid. I loved him. But yeah, this one, I feel like they did do kind of episodic villains for each one of the Bonds, but I do think you can trace the story of Bond. I mean, he starts off as he's not yet a 007 in the first film, and he's kind of brought in, and so then you see him. They kind of jump over what we think of being Bond, like kind of mid-career Bond.
Well, we miss peak Bond, which is kind of annoying in a way, because there seems to be like 10 or 15 years missing. And then suddenly it's like, he's a bit old and knackered now. He's coming up to retirement,
Yeah. You get the feeling he was only going to be a 007 for like 3 years, and then they're going to retire him or something.
I'm not sure what that says about Daniel Craig's aging. I don't know if they're saying he looks very rough after a few years. Because I remember the first time I saw Skyfall, I was almost like, did they gray him up? Did they make him look older? And of course, now in No Time to Die, he is naturally older. Although he still looks great, but he definitely looks kind of more hound dog now.
Yeah, I mean, he looks his age. I mean, he hasn't had any work done, and he's not. He's definitely spending time in the sun and whatnot. But of course, whenever he pops his shirt off, you're like, "Damn you, Daniel Craig!" But yeah, he's supposed to be. I mean, he's what in real life, like 10 years older than us, something like that. I don't know.
I think he's early 50s. Yeah.
So yeah, I mean, it all kind of makes sense, and it all works as far as I'm concerned, and but the emotional arc he goes on from, both in his kind of dealing with his past and dealing kind of with who he was as a kid and what happened with him, and then whatever happened with Blofeld, but as well how he's been with, how he was with women before Vesper, how he was we only ever really saw very, very little of romancing Bond in these films. He just wasn't really slowing down to do that through these movies. There's no like love interest in Skyfall that I would spend time thinking about. And
he doesn't
certainly
actually have no relationship in Quantum with the girl who wants revenge. I can't remember her name.
Yeah.
So it's kind of like went from Vesper was just like the love of his life who broke his heart, and then and this I think the problem with Spectre, like the last film before this, was everybody was saying Madeline and Blofeld were both kind of weak, and when you kind of heard they were both coming back for this, it was like, well, is he going to try to redeem them? And I think it does a little bit. I think Madeline a lot more than Blofeld.
Yeah,
but definitely, it's interesting where they went with it. We can talk about that more. I personally, I'll put my cards on the table straight away. I think the first hour of this, or the first part of this up until the ship sinking, is great. Classic Bond. I was having a great time. I think the second half of the film, it slowly degrades, and I've got some real problems. Not with what you think I would have problems with, like the ending, but more just kind of like, the tone, the writing. It seems a bit confused quite often.
And so there were a number of people who worked on the screenplay. My feeling on this movie, and I will, Stuart, was asking me, because I said I'd watched it, and he was like, well, I'm not going to, ask, but I'll just listen to it. I was like, spoiler, I didn't have any problems with this movie. Like, I don't really know what I'm going to talk about, but
I've got lots to talk.
Excellent. But my feeling, I did say to him, my feeling on this is they didn't have the money to do it, and probably couldn't keep Daniel Craig under contract. I think this should have been 2 movies.
Yeah. Well, I also think what happens to Bond, and let's just say it, Bond dies at the end of this.
What?
It's no. What do you mean? And it's like I think that's probably Daniel Craig loves that because it means he never has to come back.
Yep.
However much money they wave at him, and they've been waving a lot of money at him the last couple of films. And B, it's from an actor's point of view. Hey, it's interesting. I've done something different with the character. It's definitely going to be remembered. I personally see it as kind of an experiment in the franchise, one that maybe shouldn't be repeated. But it's definitely. I mean, it's definitely different. Yeah. I mean, to start off, so this was supposed to come out in, I think, November 2019, which I really bet they wish they had. And then I remember it got moved to April 2020, and I actually had tickets. I had tickets for a couple of shows, like physical tickets in my hand, ready to go. And it was about 2 weeks away, and I was getting very excited. I think phoning you up and trying to lock you down to one of those shows. And
I remember that. Yeah.
Suddenly, this funny virus started getting mentioned, and this was the first big casualty, like film-wise. This was the first film to move, I think, and it moved about 4 times, and finally ended up, I think, like November or October 2021. So really, it moved 2 years. So this film was like more than 3 years old, really. It also had 3 advertising campaigns. And it's interesting because I remember joking with somebody that they were kind of running out of clips for the trailers when they kept bringing the trailers back, because they had to show, obviously something different each time to keep people interested. And the last one was interesting because the last one went, you saw the beginning, and it kind of had clips from Casino, and it was like, be there for the end. And as soon as they said that, I was like, I bet they kill him. I bet they're going to kill him. Because it just seems so final. It was like, you were with him at the beginning. Watch his, not demise, but, as close to that as you could get away with saying, really.
Yeah, I mean, you may have been saying to me, they keep showing more stuff, because I remember making a conscious decision not to watch any more trailers.
Yeah.
I was like, I'm going to end up seeing this whole movie before I see the movie.
Yeah, totally.
Yeah, I didn't. I didn't come into it thinking he was going to, and I honestly did not think that's what was going to happen in the movie. Straight up through maybe until maybe there was like 5 minutes left.
Okay.
I was actually kind of impressed that was the direction that they went for this. When he got shot was when I was like, oh, he's gonna die on the island. They're gonna go ahead and do that.
See, I have to kind of credit my friend Casper with this as well. He said as soon as they killed Felix, I was like, I've got a bad feeling about this. And it did seem to be like, okay, they're kind of like they're cutting down everything they built up over the last 4 films, really.
Well, there was a stray line from the little girl whose name Matilda, where she was like, I was bit by a mosquito or something. And then she said, do mosquitoes have friends? And I was like, what?
I'm like, why is this in a Bond film?
Yeah. And I was like, well, people keep kind of showing blotchy before they die from Heracles. I was like, oh, they're going to kill the little girl? And I was like, that's a hell of a tragedy for, I thought the Bond was going to hang it up because he couldn't do it anymore after that. And so I kept waiting for the little girl to get sick or something to happen. And there's a couple things in the script that I kind of wondered, because I know Phoebe Waller's
Oh yeah.
Bridge came on, and if she didn't talk them out of doing some of the things that I suspect they were going to do,
Yeah.
not the least of which was the like, oh, if you touch that flower, you can control your mind, and then she's the
Yeah.
Madeline sitting there with the tea, and I was like, oh god, are they really going to do the thing where she has the gun in her hand and then it wavers and she can't shoot James?
Yeah.
And I was like, you have that whole scene in your head, and instead they do this thing where she throws the tea in the guy's face. I was like, heck yeah, man. Like,
Yeah.
that's such a much better choice at this point.
Yeah. I mean, I actually forgot about Phoebe Waller-Bridge, and now you've said that, I think her writing stands out the most. And I don't know, maybe she didn't write this, but this sounds like her when she goes like, I think Tanner goes, yeah, Blowfield, he's as mad as a box of bees or a hat of bees or something.
Yeah.
And that really, those little jokes in there definitely sound like her. But yeah, for me, I've got a lot of issues just with the script, and I've got a lot of issues with. I think Daniel Craig is great in this. I think it's almost on a par with Casino Royale. It might even be better. I think what holds it back for me, and it's great to see him awake as well, because Spectre, he was sleepwalking through, kind of like Sean Connery in You Only Live Twice. He was like, just give me the check. Whereas in this one, he's woken up and he's really going for it. And I totally give him credit for that, if nothing else. But this didn't feel like Bond to me. He was way too emotional through the whole thing. He's telling people he loves them. He's kind of like, at the end he has that weird scene with Saffron, the villain, where he's like, I'm so sorry, I'm very, very sorry, I'll do anything you say. And he's kind of groveling, and he's playing him. He's trying to get his gun and distract him. But I'm like, Bond wouldn't say that. Bond wouldn't be doing this, It's weirdly overly emotional all the way through.
I'm going to disagree with you on some of that. I have found since Casino Royale, like Casino Royale up through kind of like the let's hit Bond in the nuts with the rope scene feels very much like Bond to me. Classic Bond. And then once you have the thing, which is, I guess, from more or less taken from the book, where he's taken to rehabilitate with Vesper, and then it's like, now it's Bond. It's a little like Tracy and Bond, like now we're on our like European tour and we're riding on a boat and we're, he may go back, he may not. We don't know what he's up to. And she breaks through his whole facade, right? That's kind of the point of Vesper, is she actually gets to him. And then, of course, she got to him because she was a Spectre agent all along, right?
Well, she was kind of like, she was more like a kind of like puppet, wasn't she? Really,
right? Yeah. But nonetheless,
I suppose what I'm trying to say is, like, in Casino Royale, I remember being flabbergasted in that one scene where Bond told her he loved her. He just went, "I love you," and I was like, "Holy shit!" James Bond has never said that before.
Yeah.
Well, in this, he's saying it every other conversation, every other kind of scene. Or, even with Blowfield, he kind of like goes, die Blowfield, and it's like, and he's losing his temper and doing all this kind of stuff. And I'm not saying he hasn't done that before, but it's like, there's so much emotion. And I'm like, I don't know. Yeah, even from Spectre, it just doesn't feel like Bond. It feels more like Daniel Craig.
Yeah, well, I think that was a choice. Yeah, I think to keep him interested, probably, and he does do a lot more wisecracking in this one that I thought was, but I thought it was really well written. By the way, like it didn't feel like someone like rewriting old warmed over Roger Moore quips. Like,
no, some of them were very funny, and there's also some unintentional funny stuff which we can talk about later. Which I'm not sure if some of these were supposed to be funny, but yeah, with the Craig stuff, he was very good. Actually, this is the best he's ever been with humor. So yeah, that was nicely done. I do agree with that.
Anyway, I felt like it was all part of an arc of like Quantum of Solace. I haven't seen in a long time, but my takeaway from that was
He was just angry in that. He's very angry.
yeah, he's just on the warpath after the whole Vesper thing.
Yeah.
And then in Skyfall, he definitely is going through a few different things, but he's just kind of bewildered the whole time.
Yeah, I think he feels like hung out to dry by M in that and let down, you know.
Yeah. And then you get, and then Spectre, it was kind of, that was a little bit of a patchworky sort of movie. So anyway, I'll say this, it did not bother me given where they were going with, like, this is kind of end of days for Bond.
Yeah. I mean, I also like, so a big fear for a lot of Bond fans was, those early kind of trailers and press leaks were, there's a new 007. It's obviously an African-American woman, and she's going to be a bit sassy. And, and I think a lot of us were horrified and fearful that, Bond would be this sad old guy put in his place by this young woman and made to look a bit of an idiot. And I think actually, again, credit to the producers for being savvy enough and, having run this franchise for long enough to know that would have been probably the kiss of death. So instead, I think Bond kind of gives as good as he gets. Mm-hmm. And I do like the fact that, when she says, I'm the new 007, that must upset you. And he's like, it's just a number. And then, later on, Emma says, come into the office. And, he goes, not you 007 to her. And Bond goes, that must upset you. And stuff like that. And I think that was really well done. He kind of held his own,
Yeah. I mean, I did understand that concern when
it didn't go woke, thank goodness,
Yeah. I mean, I think that the way they ended up handling it of like, she's feels she's earned the 007 thing. He's yesterday's news. And
he's retired basically.
Yeah. And she's like, oh, okay. He actually is everything that they always said he was when, I'm sure she was just kind of rolling her eyes as she's been hearing about the great prior 007, which of course is going to be a thorn in your side, but she, I think they did a really good job by the time that they teamed up at the end and, entered the base and they were working together. It was actually really cool to me because I've never gotten to see that much of Bond like paired up with someone who is on his. You always got the thing of like, oh, Felix is here to give him the information, but Felix is cannon fodder. I mean, that's kind of.
It's also we haven't really had that since Pierce Brosnan, where he had is Maggie? Was it Maggie?
Sorry, Michelle Yeoh. Yeah,
Michelle Yeoh, and then to a lesser extent Halle Berry. Mm-hmm. He kind of had that, like, you're with the CIA, this team up, and I guess ultimately going back to Roger Moore with Barbara Bach in The Spy Love Me.
Yeah.
So it's kind of cool seeing that again. I kind of actually wanted more of that. I feel like it was a bit cut a bit short, actually.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and that's kind of where I started feeling like they really could have had 2 full movies here. I would have liked to have had the introduction of Rami Malek in the first movie, and then because I thought what they ended up having to say instead of show like so much with him of like, you're not so different, you and I. And it's like, actually, they're not really that different. He has a pretty good point in a lot of ways. I mean, he's just the lunatic version of all of this stuff.
But it's also, I think, with Blofeld, they dropped the ball with Blofeld again, which is amazing when you got Christopher Waltz. But I feel like, apart from that unintentionally slow train he was on his cage, which started making me laugh because he was going so slow and it took so long. I'm like, what if there's a fire? But, trying to make him like Hannibal Lecter in this, and it just didn't work. And then his death was so throwaway. And I'm like, wouldn't it have been better if, like, Safran had, like, broken him out of prison because they were working together and then they'd have fallen out or something, you could have gone so many different ways with this. But, again, like, Blofeld was kind of, like, badly used, I think. I think actually Saffron was a pretty weak villain, to be honest. I mean,
yeah,
I like
yeah. I mean, and
Malik,
that's
but
yeah. I mean, I agree. I mean, that's kind of where in the end I'm like, we needed. We were so concerned with Blofeld, and then
yeah,
Blofeld just like keels over dead.
yeah,
Um, and then he dies off screen. To be honest, I mean, you see him starting to
yeah,
die, but then someone comes in and says Blofeld's dead.
yeah.
And you're like, oh,
He's over there.
okay, yeah.
I'm not
So
quite dead yet.
so yeah, I definitely would have liked like that to have been the end of the movie, like a big the first movie of my imagined, two-part film of, oh my
Yeah,
God, Blofeld's dead, and like them pull all the pieces together and go, it's been whatever his name was, Lucifer Satan, all along.
yeah,
And
yeah.
then they have the whole rest of, you could have a lot more buildup of who is this guy, what is his relation to Madeline, and because they end up just saying everything instead of really showing it, because of
Does.
time.
And that's why I think also the ending's kind of. I mean, actually, to be honest, let's go through it from the start because I was going to jump straight to the ending, but let's go from it from the start. So this starts off with two pre-credit scenes. I think probably also the longest pre-credit scenes in the series.
We were
We've had
well
a
into the
few.
movie by the time they hit the credits. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, and it's partly because there's two almost like two like little mini films. One of them's almost like a horror kind of set, I guess, in the 90s when Madeline's kind of about 10 years old, and her dad, of course, was Mr. White from the previous films. And there's Saffron, who's the kind of like the only survivor of his family getting killed off by Blofeld by Mr. White. I guess comes for revenge to the house and kills the mom. And then Madeline shoots him, but he decides to rescue her when she falls through some ice. Fantastic imagery, by the way, with all that stuff. Very, very spooky. Again, though, I didn't really kind of like accept the why he wanted to save her. I'm like, I guess he was like, oh, she's got spunk or she's brave. But I was like, also, the age difference. What's going on there? Because like, I think it's supposed to be like Rami Malek's a lot older than her, but they look the same age, and he must have been at least 16.
Yeah. So I think the reason he was supposed to have saved her was it's part of like the psychology of who the character is he understood the kids never should have suffered when his father was being assassinated, but Spectre went with this like big fell swoop, and so he was the only survivor. And so I think, he kind of pondered that and was like, she doesn't need to die. There's no reason for it.
Well, later on with Madeline's daughter, though, he doesn't seem to care that much. He's like, I'll kill her. I don't know if he's bluffing, but
Yeah, I don't know. I think at that point he's trying to do something else. And he's really trying to get Madeline. Matilda, as the daughter of Bond, is a reminder that he does not have her. So she's disposable to him.
Yeah. Well, it's kind of a strange relationship where he kind of relies on her, I guess, by threatening the daughter to kill Blofeld.
Mm-hmm.
Then later on at the end, there's a very weird scene where he's carrying Matilda away. He's kind of got her, and she bites him, and he puts her down and goes, "So, you don't want my protection?" And she goes, "No." And he goes, "Well, go away then." And she runs off. He lets her, and I'm like, "That's weird." She's just running down this base, this 5-year-old,
I mean, I think legitimate. And so I think that was supposed to have been a sign of like how unhinged he kind of is. Like he thinks he's protecting her when he's the greatest threat she's ever had, of course, in her life. And her running off then, I mean, in his mind, it's like, well, this place is full of like a pool that can dissolve you, and like, it's full of toxins. She's going to be dead, in an hour. is a 5-year-old in this place.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so I kind of I think that's where they were going with that. But yeah, it was an interesting moment and an interesting I will say this. It took me a really long time, and this is why I wish they'd been able to show more and maybe extend a little bit more. I could not figure out what the hell was going on with anybody in this movie until like 3/4 of the way through. Like I didn't know what their motivations. Yeah, I didn't know what their motivations were, and so it's like I know things are happening, but I don't really understand why.
Well, I think this is bad writing, and I'm saying this as somebody who likes this film. You know, obviously the Bond film. I'm still going to love it on some level.
Mm-hmm.
You know, it's like an ugly child. I'm still going to love it, but it's like, you know, I just think the script is very dodgy. You know, and tonally it's all over the place because, like, you know, you have that. Well, the other pre-credit scene is set in, I guess, 2015, straight after Spectre.
Mm-hmm.
And Madeline and Bond are kind of just traveling, having a good time, in love. And they end up in, is it Tuscany or Italy?
I have no idea where they were, man. I have not a clue. It's the first time I've really missed the really big, like, Lisbon, you know, whatever the titles are that they would throw up on the screen 10 years ago.
Yeah, well, it's obviously, you know, somewhere in Europe, somewhere in the kind of like, you know, Southern Europe, and it happens to be where Vesper's buried. So, you know, Madeline says, well, you know, as we're here, I think it would do you good to go and, you know, see her grave. And so Bond goes there where there's a rubbish booby trap by Spectre. Because I'm like, why didn't they just get a sniper?
Always the question.
They got a bomb in a bunch of flowers, which actually goes off right in Bond's face and doesn't kill him. He's just like a bit stunned. So it's not even. And I have to say, I have a problem with this film because it's the Die Hard 2 effect of grenades going off next to Bond and him getting up and having a bit of hearing loss for 2 seconds.
Yeah, there's no shrapnel in any of these grenades. They just go boom. Yeah.
But it does lead into a lovely chase with him on a bridge and some great stunts. Great bit of Aston Martin work as well.
Yeah, I thought that, you know, a lot of that was really, really nice, but it was also all kind of there's this like thing with Madeline in this whole part where she starts hinting at that she has a secret, and this is another thing I wish they'd had a second movie for.
Yeah,
I felt like they needed to explain more. Like, I don't know if they ever really explained what her big secret was. And she said, "Oh, the man in the mask."
Well, she's talking about Saffron, so she wants to tell him about Saffron, I think.
But I don't know why that's a secret. I don't know why she's hanging on to that.
I mean, because it concerned her. Well, it concerned her father. Maybe but then Bond knows all about her father. So yeah, you're right. I don't know why that would be an issue.
I honestly felt like that was left over in the cut, and like there was something they forgot to add in.
Yeah,
to the film.
Well, actually, isn't the thing she wants to tell him? Well, she also, there's a nice touch which I only got on the second viewing, which is we have this cool scene with the Aston Martin. And he takes us to the train, puts on the train, and then says, you know, you're never going to see me again. And there's a lovely bit where she actually touches her stomach, which is, you know, I guess like foreshadowing. But then also, it's like, you know, he loves her. Couldn't he at least check up on this? You know, because he's basically saying, I believe Blofeld, you know, I'm so paranoid, which, you know, is a little bit Bond, but I just think it's like a very easy way of getting her out of the story for 5 years.
Yeah.
You know, because I mean, like if you were in love with somebody, would you just go, aha, you know, fuck you? And there's that weird thing in Aston Martin as well, where he almost gives up for a minute. And they're shooting at the bulletproof glass, and a huge amount of shots, by the way, in the same spot. And then he kind of goes, "Fair enough, you know, we'll give it another go," and you know, starts firing back. And I'm just like, you know, yeah, you know, all of that was a bit troubling for me. It just kind of didn't seem to be like real human emotions.
So, I mean, I'm going to be very kind to all of that, and
You be kind, be kind.
I,
It's good when we don't agree.
my read on that was he's just come from, telling her about Vesper, going to her grave. Vesper's on his mind, and the last person he was in love with betrayed him, whether it was her fault or not. And here he is again, and he thinks she has something to do with this at this point. And that to me is kind of what was going through his head as they were getting shot at. I mean, there was a real possibility in that scene. Not really, because I knew I had another 2.5 hours of movie to go. But
yeah,
like, is he going to be like, why am I trying? Like, why do I bother? I can just sit here and wait for the inevitable to happen, because every time I try and do something good, something bad happens.
Is that Bond though again? Would Bond give up?
I
wouldn't do that.
I think if you look at what happened, I'm not saying Sean Connery and I'm not saying Roger Moore or George Lazenby, but I think with this Bond, I don't think it's out of character. I think
Sean Connery would kick them in the nuts, and Roger Moore would get his wristwatch out.
Yeah, Sean Connery probably would have shot her out of and been like, "Good luck," as she went flying in the ejection seat. And then he would have had some great quip about, like, you can't, women drivers or something, as he would have driven off. So yeah, that was how I read the scene. And so I was much more forgiving. I thought it was more curious that he was like, I'm going to put you on the train. But at the same time, I think that was his way of dealing with, I don't know if I can trust you or not. But now I never am going to see you again. And that'll make it so I don't have to worry about trusting you or anybody else again. And so he, ends up retreating to what looked like a badass house in Jamaica.
That was nice seeing him kind of off duty. Yeah.
And
like
so, and I don't think, M or anybody was ever going to be able to bring him back. So it was really nice that it was the person who actually got him to do something again was Felix.
Yeah, totally. And it was great to have like Jeffrey Wright back in it as well, back in the franchise after a couple of films. And yeah, I mean, like, so we have the Jamaica scene. He agrees to well, actually, we're also so it's 5 years later at this point, and I guess it's set 2020 when this was supposed to come out, and we see a break-in at a chemical kind of like I guess like chemical facility, that has all viruses that must have been a bit worrying for the Bond producers when COVID. But I do like I can see he could be very easily annoying. I actually like the kind of borderline comedy scientist who's like, oh yes, I like animals, on the phone. And he's kind of like, kind of wacky but menacing. And he makes it to the end of the film as well,
Yeah, I thought it was an interesting choice. So often in Bond movies, the scientists just get to like grit their teeth and look upset. And so giving him some actual personality, so he had something to actually hang on this guy, as he was like, he clearly is not thinking about the implications of what he's doing. And I'm not clear on his motivation, but he's, you at least remember him and know kind of, he's the football that we have to worry about, as he's getting moved around.
He's kind of like, he's just like an interesting character as well, and I mean, it's like, I think he like injects some humor, because like there's quite a funny scene where his workmates are like, saying, we put your lunch in the Ebola or whatever at the start, or the smallpox. And then suddenly it just turns very dark, where they kind of get shot, and he's he's basically the double agent who's causing it all. So, in a way, he's the most evil person kind of in the film. Although I think towards the end, I think his death is kind of weak because again, he starts mentioning some racist things about wiping out, I guess, certain races. And Naomi, who's obviously African American, she has a terrible line where she goes like, "It's time. Do you know what time is it?" And do you know what time it is? And he goes, "No." And she goes, "Time to die," and pushes him in the acid. And I'm like, oh, that's like the bottom of the barrel, really. But yeah, through the film, he's quite funny. Where he's like, they've got explosives, Mr. Safran, and all this kind of stuff. Yeah, so he was cool. But then, so we have the Felix meets Bond, tells him he needs to go to Cuba to actually capture the scientist guy. And then we kind of have almost like a little self-contained part of the film, San Cuba, with basically Paloma.
Yeah, Anna de Armas, or is that her name?
Who's kind of cute as a button. And I know a lot of people have said, oh, she's the best part of the film. She's better than Madeline. I don't agree. I think she's great, but she's almost a bit too broad, I think. A bit too kind of cartoony a little bit, I think. And also, again, with the writing, that I've only had 3 weeks training. Is that a joke?
I think it was a joke. I took it as a joke. Yeah. I think she was trying to set Bond on his heels a little bit and have some fun with him, but they don't have enough time to really set her up as that character.
Yeah.
And
it's almost like Craig just enjoying working with the actress, because he kind of basically goes, "You were great in that scene. See ya."
Yeah, and I was like, I was looking at the film kind of afterward and thinking about it, and I was like, she was a lot of fun. She was, charming. Everybody likes her when she shows up and stuff.
Yeah.
But why? Why was she in the movie at all?
And she's just the contact there, and she just brightens it up a bit. I guess that's that scene,
Yeah, and I was like, are they planning to do a spin-off or something? That's all I could think was you've now set up Lashana Lynch as Nomi, who's survived and knew Bond and all that, and and I they have her, and I was like, clearly still around.
Well, I think, I mean, obviously with Anna de Armas, she's not coming back because she's too much of a big film star anyway.
Well, but not if she's leading her own not 007 movie with Lashana Lynch.
Well, they're never going to do these spin-offs. They always talk about this with Halle Berry and stuff. They never.
Yeah, you know what? You're right. And because I very much remember being told we were getting a Jinx movie.
Yeah. And with Naomi, I don't think people like the character well enough, because although she kind of redeems herself towards the end, and kind of says, give Bond back his 00 status, and starts kind of acting normally. I think she's way too bitchy for the first 2/3. I mean, not just to him, but even to Madeline in the bathroom. She's like, I'll leave you to do your special preparations when Madeline's putting her makeup on or something. I'm like, what's wrong with this person? Why is she being so bitchy all the time? So I think, she's a bit overdone in the other way. If one's too cute, the other one's too kind of sassy or too bitchy. But then, so I guess next we have they take the scientist. Bond takes the scientist to Felix, and then we kind of have a double cross where the guy that Felix is working with, this young guy, kind of basically shoots Felix and blows up the ship and flies off with the scientist, and that's where we lose Felix. That's where Felix kind of checks out.
Yeah, which I remember having the thought when he showed up in this movie, not that I thought he was going to die, but that I was like, man, Felix only made it through, one book, a book and a half or something like that. And I was like, well, he's made it through all these movies. Good for Jeffrey Wright. And then it's like, oh no, Jeffrey Wright.
Actually, I do have to mention something. Just jumping back a little bit to that, to when they actually get the scientist. It's like which he's hosting from his cell in London, and I remember thinking, watching it, why is Bond even there? Because like basically he's walking into this party of all the top Spectre agents. Who's probably the person they hate the most? It's like him. I mean, I'm sure he's on all their wanted posters, and he's just wandering around,
So he could see the scene, so we could see the scene where all the Spectre people got killed. That's why he was there.
But yeah, and then also the scientist has some terrible bad exposition where for the idiots in the audience, he goes, "Only the Spectre people are dying," and it's like, we know, we're watching it. So Felix dies, and then Bond goes back to London, and I guess gets Moneypenny and Q's help. Which there's a nice little scene of around Q's flat, which I thought was nice. I know some people have kind of gone, "Wow, they made Q gay," and I'm like, well, it's a throwaway line. Who cares, right? I mean, it's
were people really like invested?
I think some people they've made him gay. They're trying to be like progressive and trying to be too current with their message and whatever. And for me, it was like, dude, who cares? Does it affect the plot? Who cares?
No, it didn't seem out of care. Yeah, I do want to back up a little bit and talk about Logan Ash, the turncoat, State Department guy. When that guy walked on, I was like, that guy looks too much like Tony Goldwyn not to be evil. Yeah. It's like Tony Goldwyn had a career for about 10 years there that was entirely to be the guy who seemed nice, but actually was a bad guy.
Well, even Bond says it, doesn't he? Because he goes, that guy smiles too much. And it's true. He kind of does,
Yeah. And so you just knew this guy's going to be the one who screws him over, which I guess the movie, it just doesn't have to care about that. Like, you kind of know that's going to happen in one of these movies anyway. There's always some turncoat, and they're not going to make it be Felix at this point. So, I was just like, but does he have to actually remind me of Tony Goldwyn? But anyway.
Well, he's kind of, we're kind of back in London, and Bond's getting help from Q and Moneypenny. We also have a nice little cameo by Timothy Dalton's Aston Martin from The Living Daylights, which I guess is Bond's spare that he keeps in his garage.
Okay. Like, they made such a big show out of showing that car.
Yeah.
That I was like, I am missing something. And I'm glad you explained it.
Yeah. Yeah. Although, so we're supposed to think that Craig's got his own timeline separate from the other Bonds. Obviously, he's never been married. Because, you go through the other Bonds, Connery, Lazenby, Moore, Dalton, and Brosnan are all supposed to be the same character. And, this is why Roger Moore's visiting Tracy's grave in one of his films.
Yeah.
This is why in, License to Kill, at the start, Felix's wife says, did I say something wrong? And Felix goes, oh, yeah, he was married once, but she was killed, So, they're all supposed to be the same character. Craig isn't. Craig's his own entity. We've seen him go from start to finish. But then they'll kind of throw in something like that, the Aston Martin, which is kind of subtle. You can get away with that. But then they'll also have, later on, Ray Fiennes sitting, looking at pictures of past M's. And okay, you've got Judi Dench, fair enough. But you've also got I think it's Robert Brown. And I'm like, well, Robert Brown was M for a bunch of other Bonds. So is this supposed to be what are we doing? So it kind of wants to have its cake and eat it a little bit, I think. Although I was actually a bit sad they didn't have a picture of Bernard Lee. I'm like, come on, get a picture of Bernard Lee up there as well, And I did like the fact that Ray Fiennes was getting fatter and having less hair. So he slowly looked like he was turning into Bernard Lee, actually.
I had that passing thought as like, man, he's really starting to look the part here in 2020 or whatever. So,
and weirdly, I just saw Kingsman over Christmas, and in that he looks fit and ready to go. And I'm sure they plonked a wig on him in Kingsman, but he must either be wearing some stuffing or he lost some weight one way or the other. Because he does look quite different actually.
Yeah, I think he mostly stays really trim, but I'm sure he's like, oh, I'm playing M. Time to hit the ice cream shop. So
Where's the pasta? Where's the pasta?
yeah. Never ending bowl.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Good times are here again. So we have Blofeld's scene, and then we have so Bond with Q, and then really we're kind of going into the last kind of like third of the film now, where Madeline kind of runs out because she kind of didn't really want to kill Blofeld. She was kind of under duress, I guess. But Bond knows where she's gone, which is the same house. Weirdly, she's living in her parents' house where she saw a horrible murder years before. She's decided to stay with that house. In I think Norway. I think it was Norway.
I have no idea. I really wish this movie had done the big like Norway or whatever.
Norway.
Yeah, let us know what's going on.
Somewhere that is not the USA.
Yeah.
But it's so Bond. We have a nice little action scene there. Although before that, we should talk about. We have almost like a soap opera scene, really, which there was some nice stuff in it. But again, I feel like Craig started getting too emotional. He was like, the only 5 minutes of my life I regretted is, when I put you on that train and I love you and all this kind of stuff. And I'm like, okay.
Well, I mean, I think this is where I think they could have done with more movie and they tried to cram it all into, these various pockets of like the pre-credit sequence and whatnot. I don't have a problem with the character having felt that way about Madeline because we were told that he loved her in the prior movie and it felt totally unearned. So you have to walk into this movie and go, that's how he feels about her. Yeah, I guess I'm accepting that as a reality. So I don't have a problem with him. I compare it a lot to Vesper, and when Jamie and I were talking a little bit about the movie afterward, and Jamie's a Vesper Lynn stan, like she thinks Vesper's like the best Bond girl ever to walk the earth, and I'm not going to argue with her on it.
She's pretty good.
Yeah, she's great. She's great, but they didn't do enough in the Inspector, and I don't think Léa Seydoux is good enough as an actor to necessarily warrant a lot of what you need to also if you fell in love with her too, you wouldn't worry about any of this. But there's no point in the beginning of this movie or in the prior movie where you also fall in love with this character. You fall in love a bit along with Bond with Tracy, right?
Yeah. Oh yeah.
And you fall in love with Vesper with Bond in Casino Royale.
I think that's why they have such an emotional punch, both of those.
Yeah, and this you don't get that, and so when he's like, "I love you," you're like, I don't know where this is coming from. It's because you, as an audience member, never got to go on that journey with him.
Yeah, you got a good point. You got a good point there. But I do think it is the writing as well, because I feel
it's all the writing. I think it's all the writing of they should have done something more to redeem her as a character. Have everything that happens in kind of the pre-credit sequence should have been about halfway through my imagined first movie, and then you would have had the kind of setup of why does he love her?
Yeah,
why is it now painful for him, and now he's going through the arc of, oh, Blofeld did this to me, and then at the end of my imagined first film, it was not Blofeld's dead now. Like all of that's done with, and now you're dealing. Once you hit him showing up at this other house and making this confession in part 2 of my movie, then you have a lot more padding to an understanding of where he's coming from when he starts delivering all his emotion bomb.
Well, Yeah, and I guess how I feel is he sent her away so easily on the train. Now, okay, he's had 5 years to think about it, but now he's bearing his soul. And I'm like, but surely if he felt like that originally, he wouldn't have sent her away on the train. You know what I mean?
I don't know. I mean, I think that was the choice the movie made of him again, not knowing if he could trust her or what her situation was.
Yeah.
And but to your point earlier, like he didn't check in on her and see really what was going on. Maybe he did, and they just don't talk about it. But he didn't seem to. He didn't seem to know it was. He didn't know she had a child, for God's sake. So
Yeah,
um,
the child, I'm glad you mentioned that because I mean, so they suddenly produce this child, and then she goes, it's not yours, it's not yours, which again, it obviously is, right? we're watching this going, that's his kid. Um, and you know, right at the end, she kind of goes, she is yours. And I'm like, well, that was a waste of time. You know, she could have, why didn't they just have her say, she's yours, but I don't want her to, you know, have anything to do with you because of your lifestyle or whatever. And then at the end, she could go, I want to, you know, I don't want you to die. I want her to grow up with you. I mean, already that feels better to me. I feel like I've just rewritten it better straight away.
yeah. I mean, I don't know what the various forces were that had us end up with the movie we had. I mean, so whatever happened between the April, them deciding they needed to add another 6 months on and do reshoots and whatever, tells me something must have been very broken with the
Yeah,
film.
trying to say.
And it's kind of a minor miracle.
No, go on. Yeah, I mean,
Yeah,
they're second guessing themselves. Maybe I don't know. But we have a pretty good action scene then, a chase, and I do. There's a lovely bit in it where the villains kind of go past them on the road in these jeeps, in these Land Rovers,
mm-hmm.
and then there's kind of a pause, and then you see them coming back over the crest of the bridge after them. I thought that was very well done. Um, and then a good chase kind of into, you know, over some rough ground and into a forest. And then Bond kind of goes a bit home alone again, like he did in Skyfall, and you know, set some traps. Probably leading up to the best bit where he kills off what's his name, Logan?
Yeah,
Yeah, which is, you know, he has a great line where he's like, "Help me out, brother," and he's got this kind of car poised on a branch above him. And, you know, Bond goes, I had a brother, he was called Felix, and then kicks the tree. Which is a great kind of like callback to Roger Moore, I think, in For Your Eyes Only.
yeah,
With the clear.
yeah. I really liked that action sequence a lot. I thought it was incredibly well designed. I thought that it felt like more than just like filler action scene. Like it was progress. It was also progressing the plot as it was happening, as he was kind of like, you know, now you can see he's concerned for the girl, whether or not she's his daughter, and kind of he's at least imagining some family unit that he's got to protect. And the but the to me it felt like I can totally see that in a Connery Bond movie had they had the technology and the wherewithal to do it back then. Like it felt very much like, yeah, I can totally see Bond creeping around in the woods. You know, you've seen him creeping around in the woods at night in a black turtleneck popping out at people, right? And here they did it with fog, so they could have a little more light and a cooler effect. And so it in the end, it's like, well, you think of Bond with his, you know, little Walther PPK, and, you know, I was like, but no, there's lots of stuff of Bond doing, you know, exactly this kind of stuff midway through a movie. So
it's nicely violent for a PG-13 as well. I mean, he's basically just you don't really see anything, but he's shooting into the windshields of these cars, and he's making sure he's dead. You know, and I think that goes on to his fight with Saffron at the end, which is like, you know, when he snaps his arm, which is wonderfully brutal, but very Bond, I think.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah. I mean, the villain's base there, I mean, the whole ending is it to me very, you know, they made sure they get on all their Bond check marks. They've got crazy, you know, this one's not a car that turns into a boat, it's a glider that turns into a submarine. Like cool stuff like that. You of course have your kind of like island base, for your villains hiding at. And he's got all
wearing Hugo Drax's old cast off clothes.
Exactly, and he's got people in matching uniforms running around. I mean, it's unfortunately, I think it's too much tell and not enough show for what's going on with him.
Well, it's very muddled, and watching this. So, okay, my two issues are basically, the big one is, me, you've been to lots of movies with me. Sadly, not for a while theatrically, but we've been to a lot in the past. Hopefully, we will again. And I'm a big crier. I'm happy to admit that. I will cry at anything, however cheesy and rubbish. I will cry at the Love Bug when Herbie's a bit damaged. I watched this 4 or 5 times now, and I'm absolutely dry-eyed. And I'm like, they're doing something wrong. They're doing something wrong when, I'm basically like, floods of tears at the end of Logan, for instance. But this one, I was just kind of like, all right.
Yeah, I won't disagree with that. I kind of watched more in awe of like, oh, they're really going to kill Bond. Not like teary-eyed, but like, oh my God, they're really going to do this, because you don't really have a sense of anything being lost when Bond dies. He
have to die. Shot him up, and he was crawling say he still kills Saffron, it's exactly the same, but then say he's crawling towards the detonator, and you could even have him turn it off when it's on 007, and he just kind of smirks and then dies, I think that would have been a lot more impactful, because he's like, he almost does like a crappy victory lap. And he's like, goes up on the roof, has a conversation, hangs out. And it's just, I don't know. It's just like, plus the fact that the whole reason behind him sacrificing himself, I think is kind of slightly broken, because it's like Saffron has this vial, explains it very last minute after he's used it. So we're like, what's going on? Kind of. Mm-hmm. And he's like, now neither of us can love her. And he's like, okay, so Bond's got the virus. So I guess he can't risk Madeline and Matilda getting close to him, or he can't even risk himself being in society, because it could spread to other people and eventually get to them. But this is James Bond. Get Q on the phone. Quarantine yourself. Stay on the island. I don't know. It's like, it just feels very wonky.
Yeah, I mean, I think there's this particular version of Bond. They were always pretty clear had a bit of a death wish to begin with. He was a lot more of a self-destructive character. The behaviors we think of being Bondian, they were him acting out. We're kind of how Vesper even, I think, decodes him at the when she first meets him. But he's I think at this point, they needed to come up with their sci-fi reason to paint him into a corner, and
it desperately wants to be on Her Majesty's as well, to the point where it references it about 3 or 4 times. And I'm like, but you're not earning it. On Her Majesty's worked because, like you said earlier, you saw these two people fall in love, and it's very believable. And then, they got married right at the end. And then it was like, boom. And Bond's like, that was Blofeld, let's go. And then he realizes she's been shot. And, it's like she's dead. Whereas in this, it's like, why is he staying there? Why is he not jumping off the cliff and getting out there,
Well, I think the because they painted him emotionally into a corner with everyone keeps explaining to him over and over throughout the movie, you can never get rid of this once you have it. We don't have that technology. We're not going to have that technology. And so I think the idea is he was happy enough that he had known love for a time, and it was real.
Yeah.
And that's all he needed. And now he, and which, your mileage may vary on that, your personal belief on whether that works or not. But I think that's what the movie was trying to do.
Yeah.
And,
you know what works for me? Roger Moore in a shower with the 20-year-old and a loofah. That's what I want at the end of a Bond film.
Yeah. I mean, so at the very end, I made sure to watch all the way through the credits, and I said to Jamie, turned to her and said, "This will be the first one where they can't say James Bond will return." And as I said
they stretch it out. They stretch it out.
They said it at the end, and I was like, I don't. Okay, like you had a chance to not do that.
Well, it's like throwing a bone to a starving man. It's funny because when I saw this in the theater, it was like, and the first time or the second time, I waited, and there was people at the door, and again, this is the only Bond film, and I include on Her Majesty's where people left depressed. People mooch out of this like, oh, and then but there's a few hanging around the door, and then you could almost hear like an audible, oh, thank God, when it finally comes up. But they make you wait. They go through all the credits for 10 minutes. They have made by Sony. It goes black. And then finally, right at the end, they have James Bond will return. And of course he will in some form, Yeah. But this one won't. He's been vaporized.
Yeah. I mean, I at the same time, it's a movie. So all you really have to do is if say they wanted Daniel Craig's like, I was mad. I don't know what I was thinking.
I've spent all the money already.
Yeah. Let's do another one. They could just show him like getting, on a getting pulled up out of the water by Japanese fishermen,
Yeah. That's true.
And then he could be like, well, I can never go see Madeline and Matilda again. Or maybe he'd go like, they show him just like checking on her through the school window or something. And, there's ways if they wanted to do it, you can always do it. What made me laugh, I think more than anything is, man, the idea of someone who can't be with someone else because of like, I've been infected by is such an old comic book trope.
Yeah.
That it's made its way into Bond at this point. That that was on this the 10-year running Smallville TV show. That was how they got the love interest that had been there for the first like 6 seasons off the show. Was they're like, she's now infected permanently with kryptonite, so she can't ever be with Clark. And this is how we're going to explain why he marries Lois Lane later. And it was, just like, man, they just can't stay away from this. Like the audience can't deal with these two people not being together unless there's like something physically in them. I'm now radioactive. I'm now Spock on the wrong side of the glass.
Well, there you go. So we started my engine there. So I saw the Wrath of Khan a couple of weeks ago. Obviously I did. Watch it every week. No, I don't. But yeah, I managed to see that theatrically. And man, that still works. I mean, we've done a podcast on it. It's fantastic. That's the way you kill off a hero. It's so well done. Such good writing. It's earned. And my main problem with this is, the script and the tone is just all over the place. And it doesn't feel earned. His death does not feel earned, And I'm not saying that this is a bad film. I'm not saying, the other night, watching it again, I didn't enjoy parts of it. I think it's got some great stuff in, right up to the end. I love Bond going up the staircase at the end, shooting the guys. And, lots of little bits in it. But it just doesn't, especially the second half, just does not hang together for me at all.
Yeah, I mean, I think I'm a lot more forgiving of it. I'm accepting that it's the end of this chapter of the franchise before they move on to whatever they do next. And which I really hope they go and adapt the 1990s cartoon James Bond Jr. It was about the nephew of James Bond and his
That's
adventures.
quality. That's now you're talking quality products.
I kept thinking about that as I was watching the credits afterward. As like James Bond Jr. They should do it.
But it won't be as depressing as this.
But I did
something.
I did think like, hey, I bet for the next one they go for more of an action comedy.
I hope they and they can even show him like becoming a 007 again. But I hope they go back to like give the dude a mission, give him a briefing, send him off, have some fun. Because I feel like it's a long, long time since that happened. I mean, I miss Pierce Brosnan.
Yeah, well, I mean, I think people would be. We've kind of seen this multi-film experiment, and I think one, they'll probably think to cast a lot younger next time, and show him making his way out of the Royal Navy and then into MI6 and M recruiting him in or whatever. Show me the whole thing. That's fine. I mean, we start off with Bond as some kind of secret agent at the beginning of all of this, but I am totally honestly ready to get back to a more episodic Bond, even if they do some sort of serial arc.
You don't have to create these bloody universes just because Marvel did it. It's like Universal tried that with horror and it failed. Bond kind of copied it a bit, and I don't think it was particularly successful. Trying to stick it all together.
Mm-hmm.
And I mean, I agree with you. I mean, go back to what kind of worked. I think that was the fun part of Bond.
Mm-hmm.
And I mean, Daniel Craig has done a great job. Don't get me wrong, and I do like his run. But man, it's like it's kind of it is a little bit depressing.
Yeah, it's funny. I've been watching the shows, all the like Danny McBride shows on HBO, and that's like Vice Principals and Righteous Gemstones and stuff. And at some point, the shows kind of have a pattern of like they start by being like really over the top and all comedy driven, and then they start introducing the actual plot, and then the shows kind of take on kind of a dramedy angle at some point, like all three of the shows they've done. And that's kind of, and I remember when Garth Ennis was writing the Punisher comic book, and he'd started it as a comedy, as a very black comedy. And eventually it got really, really real and really grim. And he's like, look, at some point, even as a writer, I just couldn't sustain it, because the more I thought about what it would be like to be this guy, the more depressing and like horrible it kind of got for me. And I can kind of see like, okay, we've now followed that path of what that means for James Bond. Of what does it mean that he can't have any relationships? What does it mean that he kind of gets by through booze and painkillers? So, all right, we've seen that one. Time to wipe the whiteboard and now say, what does it look like for James Bond in 2024? I am very curious to see what that is. I will go ahead and say something that will shock this audience but I also would be kind of curious, without going full Danny McBride, to see what it would be like to see some of the classic James Bond very bad behavior show up and do that again in a very Sean Connery sort of way. And what that actually, how can you make that? That would be my challenge to the filmmakers is, don't do what you think you should do based on what Twitter is chattering at you every time they decide they like somebody and they say, she should be the next James Bond. Like, I'm like, there's a million other characters you can create for whoever your favorite actor or actress is to be a super spy, and they come out all the time, and those movies are perfectly fine.
I totally agree with you, and credit to the producers for kind of saying James Bond is not going to be a woman. That's not going to happen. I think they said that during the promotion of No Time to Die.
Yeah, I don't think I don't. It's one of those things of a very vocal, very small group of people thinks that that's a great idea.
Yeah.
And
we've already shown in this film you can have a female 007. It's a moniker that can be passed on.
Yeah.
But James Bond is his own entity.
Right.
And we want to see James Bond.
Yeah. I'd be curious in all kinds of different interpretations of spin-offs of whatever. But at the end of the day, I kind of want original formula to some extent, James Bond. So I'll be very curious to see what they do next. I wish in some ways this movie were different. I wish it did. I think, you talked about how you didn't feel much of an emotional punch at the end or no emotional punch. Yeah. I didn't really feel it until I heard Until the End of the World, or sorry, All the Time in the World played. And that was more for me thinking back through all of the Bonds, more than had anything to do with this particular scene in this particular movie.
The only bit that got me a little bit, and very, very, very minor, hardly a twitch, was where he said, "I'm not going to make it." Mm-hmm. Because, again, you're not used to James Bond saying that. But the fact that he kind of realized that. And, and also, I feel like they kind of missed a good opportunity because, they've been so pushy about making Daniel Craig in the last couple of films older. And, you've had him going, well, maybe you're missing a step, you're not the man you were. They should have lent into that. The same as, to be honest, they should have lent into that back in Roger Moore's last couple of films. Mm-hmm. Show him having to use his wits more because maybe he physically can't go one-on-one with a young guy. Yeah. Show him having to use gadgets more. Show him in trouble, on the back foot a bit, struggling a little bit. But I feel like, in No Time to Die, they kind of mention that a bit. There's a joke that Naomi does early where she goes like, I die Folder X. And he says, well, you should be happy with me then or something. And then later on, he's just, hey, he's just Bond. He's fine, Yeah.
Yeah. The scene that I did wonder if, given the amazing success of the GoldenEye video game, if they weren't planning on a No Time to Die video game just through the various action sequences, because I can see people very much wanting to play through the various fight sequences.
Especially that staircase at the end was, that was, and I've had friends actually criticize that as being too much like a computer game. I think they actually handle it very well. And it doesn't go on too long.
Yes, I think that's the key. I think you're right.
Yeah. Yeah, but it was almost like a first-person player, getting up the stairs. Yeah.
But yeah, I think at this point, all we can really do is say, hey, it was kind of a amazing experiment that I guess the younger Broccoli has rolled out there. And I would love to be a fly on the wall at, James Bond headquarters as they're trying to figure out. I know whomever they cast next will be wildly controversial. It does not matter if they cloned the love child of Roger Moore and Sean Connery, people still would be bent out of shape, but they always are when they announce the new Bond. And I'm just really at this point, I thought, cool. We got to wrap it up the same way we got to wrap up the Nolan Batman movies and moved on to other Batmans. And I'm ready to see kind of, what we end up getting next. I kind of hope they return to kind of the era of people throwing hats at people and people with chompy metal teeth.
Hopefully Austin Powers is far enough away now that you can get away with that again. So.
Yeah, true. I mean, Austin Powers is now 20 years in the rearview mirror. I mean, even from I think the final sequel. So, by the time you put this out, none of that will be relevant. So yeah.
Well, I did really like the bits where, Bond used his watch on the guy with the bionic eye. I thought that
Mhm.
was that was great, and I could definitely do with more of that. I just showed somebody your watch queue, and it blew his mind. I thought that was great.
Yeah,
We need more of that, I think, especially in these dark times that we live in.
yeah. And and I'd be very curious to see like new takes on basically From Russia with Love. I think you could basically like rework a script from that at this point.
Yeah,
Um,
yeah,
so go to town, Broccoli's. Let's see what this looks like.
yeah. Well, I mean, in finishing, I enjoyed this. It's a Bond film, so I'm never going to hate on it. Even the weakest ones, I'm going to enjoy. Um, really loved the first hour, or the first kind of, like I say, up until the ship sinking. I thought that was all top class, top tier Bond for me. And then I felt it just kind of slipped away, lost focus the second half, but there was still great stuff in there. Um, I did think Daniel Craig was really good though, and I think he went out on a high. So I'm glad about that. Um, Check it out if you haven't seen it. If you're a Bond fan, I'm sure you already have.
Mhm.
But yeah,
It's
yeah,
super
and
easy to get now. I think I
it
saw it was
is.
streaming now for like $6 on Prime and Apple. I went ahead and bought the Blu-ray because I'm not going to not have all the Bonds as physical media.
Yeah,
Um,
yeah.
but so
Well, I'm very glad
I'm
you.
looking forward to getting into those special features.
Yeah, and I'm very glad you watched it because I was like, as soon as I saw it, I went, I have to talk to Ryan about it. James Bond dies and has a daughter. Come on. He
Hey,
makes breakfast
one thing
for a
we
small
haven't
child.
talked about is, I mean, that kind of is they gave Superman Returns, they had 5 years and they gave him a kid, and this is just kind of a thing people seem to think is a good idea to do for characters as their kind of swan song chapter. And we can dig into it some other time on when we run into it again, but I find it kind of fascinating. I'll just put it that way.
Yeah, and on the pro side, they kept respect for the character. I mean, they kept his essence, which
Mm-hmm.
is the most important thing.
Yep.
And and the people around, the characters around him, kind of kept the kind of respect for that main character. And it was, it still looks amazing. It still has a great soundtrack,
Oh,
great
this was
effects.
all of these movies have been the best looking Bond movies since On Her Majesty's Secret Service by
Yeah,
far to me.
definitely they've stepped up a couple of steps in Skyfall. I think Skyfall was the first one where you kind of went, "Oh wow,
Yeah.
this looks like a proper film."
Yeah.
Instead of like, because sometimes the Bonds in the 70s and 80s did look a bit cheap, a bit creaky. Whereas yeah, the last three have looked amazing.
Yeah.
You know,
All right. Well, my final comment, I guess, would be Naomi Harris was a smoke show, and I will miss her as Moneypenny. But I
that
guess.
leather skirt, very nice, very nice.
All right. Well, that was my Bondism for the week. But anyway, I will we'll be back soon, not with another Daniel Craig Bond, but doing something. And Simon, thank
Definitely.
you so much for doing this with me.
Yeah, no, thank you for having me, and we'll try to do another Bond under a year this
Yeah.
time, and I'm sure we'll be back with other stuff. But yeah, thank you.
Bye bye.
Higher than the paradise, now you never see me cry. There's just more time today, no time today. No time Fool me once, fool me twice. Higher than the paradise. Now you never see me cry. There's just no time to die.
that about wraps it up for this edition of The Signal Watch, a production of the League of Melbotus. Thanks for sticking with us. If you enjoyed the podcast, we invite you to drop on by the Signal Watch blog, where you'll find write-ups of a wide variety of movies and more. We'd love to hear from you, so find us online and let us know what you think. Whether you prefer email, blog comments, or social media, we'll be happy to hear from you. We'll be back soon with more exceedingly high-quality content. So, until next time, God damn it, babies, you've got to be kind.